Hey, good morning, Josh with Josh's Severe Weather. Hope you all are having a beautiful day here and a wet one here in the southern and eastern U.S. But we do have some changes coming. I'm going to go ahead and talk about some potential for winter weather and when I think it may occur and when it may be most impactful. You're probably saying to yourself, "Hey, Josh, tell me when it's going to snow without telling me it's going to snow." I totally get it, y'all. We've had a pattern of very mild starts to the winter, but that doesn't mean we can't get a big storm in December. It's got to take some ingredients, some moisture, some cold air, a lot of other things, a lot of factors to get it to snow, especially the farther south you get. But we've seen it happen before, so it doesn't mean it can't happen again. So anyway, this week, no threat of snow across most of the central and eastern U.S. except towards the Great Lakes. It's actually going to be pretty darn wet here the next few days, especially west of the Appalachians. Might be a great week to be an umbrella salesman, which I can never see myself selling umbrellas. I would rather be an elevator salesman because, I mean, who doesn't want to be uplifting, right? So anyway, let's share the screen and get going here. How's that sound? All right. So let's take a look at when I believe we've got our best chance at getting involved in winter storms. And I say storms, I don't think we're just going to have one storm based on what I'm seeing, but I could be wrong. Doing this kind of forecast, obviously, you have some risks involved with a big bust coming. But obviously, the Western U.S. has had a pretty good snowstorm after snowstorm event across the mountains, very good for the ski areas in California. That trend, I think, is going to continue here the next, I would say, maybe 10 days or so. Then after that, as we start to see some ridging taking over in the west, a less likely and less active track for snow. Now, having said that, we are going to see occasional bouts of snow continuing across the northern tier of the country, especially Great Lakes, upper Midwest, over the next 2 weeks or so. But as we get into maybe around December 15th or so, and we start to see a pattern flip, I do think the chances for snow will start to increase in the Four Corners region, the southern and central plains, and across the Great Lakes and northern tier. And we've already seen a lot of lake snows. This is more synoptic snow, larger scale. So I think both are going to continue. So if you're in the Buffalo area and upstate New York here, more snow coming your way, unfortunately. I know you don't need any more at this point. Now, as we get later into the month of December, right around Christmas time, and maybe the few days before and after it, I think with cold air spilling far enough south, if we do get ourselves into a more active storm track, and that is asking for a lot this time of the year, then the chances, I think, may be at their best for the next month to see potential winter weather in parts of the deep south and across the Carolinas, the mid-Atlantic, and obviously up the East Coast as well. And you know what? Big December storms, we've seen a few of those the last several years. I do think if we do have a threat for that, it's going to take a lot to get it going. We're going to have a lot of indices agree, but it could happen. Just kind of uncertain at that point. But I would say probably nothing here in the next week or so. After that, though, even around Christmas time, something we'll have to keep an eye on. If something forms down here right before Christmas, there's a decent chance it's going to come farther up the East Coast, but we're going to need a strong amount of Greenland and Eastern Canada blocking, a negative NAO. So let's take a look here at those oscillations. I'll start with the Arctic oscillation. This is weatherbell.com. It's negative over the next 2 weeks, which means that cold air is likely to continue to drop southward in waves here from Canada. Positive NAO means the cold air is retreating. Negative means it's advancing. There's more to it than that, but that's kind of a general rule of thumb. This is the 21st of December. So you can see it's starting to trend back towards maybe a more neutral, but there's obviously a bigger spread when you go farther into time. And even with a neutral or even positive Arctic oscillation, there's some lag between the time frame that it takes for the cold air to retreat. So if it's neutral by December 25th, it may not get really mild until January 1st, just to give you guys some perspective on that. The NAO, a lot of people talk about it. Negative NAO obviously means stronger high pressure blocking around Greenland. It would block more storms than a Croatian goalkeeper, to be honest with you all. And it's pretty darn negative now, but we don't have all the ingredients for a big East Coast storm, which you would see a lot during this negative NAO phase because of what's happening farther west in the Pacific. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But that stays negative and maybe trends more towards neutral right before Christmas time. Again, I've seen a lot of model runs promising one thing and then backing off on it. So there's no guarantee this is going to be the case. We'll take a look at the PNA, Pacific North American oscillation. Negative PNA is what's keeping us warm here across the east and southern United States. I say warm, but the fact that we'll be in the 60s and 70s in places like Georgia and North Carolina this week versus 30s and 40s, that you can attribute a lot to that negative PNA. Now, models do show it trending in the direction we want to see for colder air to move into the east right around the 15th of December, which kind of goes in line with my forecast. Is it going to be instantly colder then? It will be once a front comes through. Is it going to instantly snow or be icy? That I do not necessarily say will be the case, but with several days where it could be negative, and again, that's assuming that the European ensembles nail it, which nothing's been nailed at this point in the winter, then definitely the chances start growing for something more wintry as we get into the week before Christmas time. Finally, I'm going to take a look at the EPO. That's the Eastern Pacific Oscillation. And I will say, with that being positive here, in fact, significantly positive over the next few days, that's what's keeping it stormy in the west and keeping it mild in the east and south, and pretty wet here as well across the mid-south. Now, as that goes more neutral, we see some back and forth here next week. And then as it looks like it trends more negative, that opens the door for Arctic highs to slip farther south into the central and eastern United States. And then, of course, that can set the table for some winter weather. But again, you're really asking a very difficult task of a meteorologist to try and guess at what's really going to happen on any given day here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm just talking about patterns and shifts and things like that that can kind of help you guys kind of gauge what may be happening. Here's the European, and we're going to take a look at the big ridge here in the Gulf of Mexico. That's this week. That's why it's pretty darn warm on the Gulf Coast, pretty foggy in the mornings, and pretty wet here in northern Mississippi, Alabama, and into Tennessee and Kentucky. Now, as we trend towards, this is the weekend, you can see high pressure intensifies from Greenland into eastern Canada. This allows a bigger trough to move into the west and continues to bomb the western mountains with major snowfall. The ridge does break down, though, here early next week. That will allow storm patterns in the western U.S. to start to shift into the center of the country. That's the area I'm going to be watching for potential big snows, maybe right here in the plains as we get towards Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And then that, of course, is going to move more to the northeast and kind of weaken. But we definitely could have a storm moving into the east later next week with colder air to follow that. Now, as we go beyond the 15th of December, this is what I think is very interesting. We see ridging taking place over the eastern Pacific and western U.S. We have ridging continuing but weakening somewhat in Greenland. And as a result, a general colder pattern takes over for the second half of December, and that intensifies as we get into next weekend, 17th and 18th, and beyond, and that could set the stage for a more active southern storm track. At the very least, it's going to be colder than average for a significant amount of time, for at least a week. So getting you right into the holiday spirits and colder weather in much of the country, with the exception of maybe the western U.S., where it could be a bit wet, but more likely it's just not going to be as snowy as it has been in Seattle and Portland. So that's the trend we're watching here. And if you look at the last couple of models, you will see that, oops, this does not go out at that far. Okay, here's the 12th. You will see that the general trend has been to intensify this cold and drop it a little bit farther south and west as well. This is the Canadian ensemble. We'll go day by day real quick. I will show you guys that ridging over the eastern U.S. There is a little storm here. I've mentioned the threat for some snow. I don't think it's going to be super high once we get out of the mountains, but there may be a light snowfall in eastern PA, Maryland here towards Friday night, Saturday. But as we get into next week, you'll see more intense troughing in the west. That drops south and east into the Rockies, followed by another trough. You can see the ridge continues but retreats over the Great Lakes. And then a bigger potential storm here towards next Wednesday. And then you'll see the cold intensifies. So the Canadian and the Euro are in bed with each other, showing a much colder pattern in the eastern United States. The Canadian does try to flatten this colder weather, but more active storm track here in the southern U.S. So when we get closer to Christmas, this is what we're watching, that southern subtropical jet stream lining up with colder than average weather across the central and eastern United States. Precipitation as well, we are looking very wet here the next week or so in this general area. Then it starts drying out. Look at the west coast, gets wet. And then we look at potentially some more active weather in this general direction. This is leading right up to about Christmas time. No guarantees we're having a white Christmas everywhere in the South, but the chances look a little bit better than they have over the last few years. I already mentioned temperatures. You'll see the trend turning a lot colder. Oh, my screen just got weird here. You'll see cold across much of the United States on the European weeklies. This was yesterday's, this is the run that just came out yesterday. Notice the run before was not nearly as cold. So I'm watching trends. See, this is right before Christmas and chilly, but not cold. The cold in the West, but look at the next model run, trending a lot colder. And then the latest run that just came out yesterday, even colder than that. Models playing catch up is what we're looking at here. We'll take some mustard with that catch up. How's that sound? And even the GFS, I know it's a dirty word in my household, but look how warm it is. And then look, that warmth starts breaking apart and it's chillier across the eastern United States. This is leading right up to about Christmas time. It does show some warmth in the Southwest. I don't know if it's going to end up being that warm, especially if we have a bigger storm in here that could make it colder. Throw it into the cog right in the wheel here. A couple of volcanic eruptions out west. Those could lead to some longer term changes in what we see as well. They add more clouds into the picture that can cool things down. Finally, we'll look at the Canadian ensemble here. This is where the average of the models shows snow cover. This is the next week. Big snows in the west, we already knew that. Some snow starting to build here in the upper Midwest, interior Northeast potentially. As we get more towards the middle of next week, we see some growth in the snow cover in this region here, and maybe some growth getting down north and west of the I-95 corridor by the middle of next week. And then as we get towards next weekend, you'll see not a guarantee, but chances starting to build down to the I-40 corridor and even farther south than that. And then maybe even down to I-20. Look at the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, all the way down to Jackson, Atlanta. Not saying it's going to snow, but if you take all of the ensembles, there are some hints that some of them show snow, and that's why the average starts climbing. But certainly something I'm going to be keeping an eye on for you guys. So I'm going to stop it right here. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to come over to my page and watch my videos. Feel free to drop me some questions. If you disagree with things, that's great. I love to hear other opinions, but let's be respectful about it. Thanks for watching, y'all. Please like and subscribe. Josh's Severe Weather, and more updates coming on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Josh'sSevereWX. Appreciate y'all's time. Thanks for enjoying my awful dad jokes, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Take care.